Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, October 5th, 2021 Board of Education Finance and Operations Committee meeting. We have all three committee members present, as well as Mr. Welton. We have Elizabeth here, Superintendent Campbell, and Tiffany. Great. With that, let's all rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. All right. Are there any public comments? None all right. Then the minutes from our May 13th, 2021 meeting. Are there any changes that anyone has to those minutes?
I don't have any changes, but are we announcing the change of committee members, et cetera?
Oh,
you can't hear that, Jan?
Yeah,
I just thought because the minutes, it does. I mean, Kara was here,
right.
Chris
Good.
was not, so it kind of makes it complicated. But it brought up the issue of should we make the announcement? I know we did at a board meeting, but in case people are just paying attention to committee,
right. So since May 13th, Chris Kaczynski has left the committee, resigned from the committee, I presume. And Athena Arveitis, am I close on your last name? Is taking his place. My apologies. Okay. Thank you for that. That's a good point.
You're welcome. The other point, I don't know if we announced, I mean, that with, I'm not sure I remember, so maybe I missed it, but having the facilities is it not part of finance and ops anymore? And okay. We can do that in updates then. I mean, because all this stuff is, like, we've been on a rhythm with the finance and ops, and because we're talking about the meeting minutes, a lot of things came up for me for continuity, and as long as we address those, I think that that's good. Okay.
Yeah. So what is going on there?
Well, we don't have any facilities on the agenda at this meeting because we've had recent presentations at the board meeting about the referendum. The last two board meetings, we went in detail really at the public board meetings about the referendum 2022 designs and as far as the summer capital maintenance projects, at the October 12th meeting, we're going to get a update on the summer 2021 capital maintenance projects, and then we're going to get a preview of next summer's, summer of 22's capital maintenance projects. So since we've had all of that, we didn't feel like this meeting was going to strictly be financial.
Okay. Yeah, Karen?
Okay, so I'm just going to stay on the same topic. And just so I guess that everybody's clear that the facilities and the referendum, as it has been for some time now in finance and ops, is it going to continue to be that way? I totally understand, why we were bringing it to the board, because that's what we do. We just, kind of do some of the detailed work and then make a recommendation to the full board, and there was a lot on it. I was just unclear as to how that was going to work, and so I thought I would ask those questions.
Well, we do plan to have facilities in this Finance and Operations Committee moving forward, but just not at this meeting.
And then, I mean, just for my own clarification, a new committee was added, and I think when Kara announced that, she said that was a board committee?
No, that's incorrect. It's a superintendent.
It's a superintendent committee?
Yes.
Okay. And then what's the?
And that was already in place. And so coming on and doing the transition with Dr. Linda Yonke, she is the one that informed me to continue to have opportunities. The question became is that there's such a large amount of work that's being done, and the amount of opportunities to bring in additional perspectives and to have some oversight in the management of that. And given the current scheduling of our finance and ops, that she suggested that we continue to have another layer of conversation in as it relates specifically to the referendum projects. And so those conversations from the referendum projects, again, it's no decisions that are being made. They are all sharing information that then is elevated and brought to the board. It's just another way of further supporting the superintendent and making sure that Chris, as well as Todd and our team, are being asked the right questions that continues to help drive the work that's being done in the referendum. This particular meeting, we felt, because of the agenda items at hand, and as Chris has already spoken, all of the previous work that has gone before the board, we felt that we had time just to really kind of focus on the finance at this point. That will not always be a play. There will be times in which we will come back and there will be agenda items that deals with the operations as it relates to facilities as well.
Okay, and that includes the referendum construction or just the summer maintenance?
The October 12th meeting is just summer maintenance.
Okay,
But at this committee meeting, we will have referendum projects moving forward.
got it. Okay. All right, anything else on that? Any changes to the minutes? Back to the minutes. Hearing none, then the minutes will stand as submitted. Next, we're going to talk about tax levy and abatement.
Good evening. Thanks for having me. So tonight we're going to look at the tax levy assumptions for CPI, new property, including debt service not only of your outstanding bonds, but the proposed Series 23 bonds, which will finish off the referendum. So just to go through the assumptions, we're not looking at any reassessment growth in property tax base, not because we don't think it's going to happen, it just makes it cleaner because we're not assuming growth in the value of that $500,000 home either. So that's steady state. New property growth of $40 million in levy years 21 and 22, and $35 million annually thereafter, and that's in line with what's actually occurred in the district year over year. CPI for levy year 22, we're thinking it's going to be close to 4.5%, one of the highest CPIs we've seen in many years. August to August, we're looking at August of 20 to August of 21, the increase is 5.3%. Bloomberg projects the December to December number at around 4.3%. So that is not this fall's levy, it's the following fall's levy. So that's something that's quite different than you've seen in the past. This fall in 2021, you probably know the levy CPI there is 1.4%. Okay, so that's already done. After 22, we're assuming 2%, which is consistent with the district's financial projections and what we've looked at in the past. The debt service payments, as I mentioned, include the Series 23 referendum bonds, plus a 1% loss in collection from DuPage County. So we're trying to match up exactly with what that debt service might be. And in terms of a timeline for the decision about an abatement, you have until March 1 of '22. So the last possible board meeting you'd be able to enact debt service abatement is February of '22.
We plan to do the estimated levy at the October 26th board meeting, and then the final tax levy will be at the December board meeting. So October 26th is estimated, and then December, I think it's December 14th is the board meeting in December, and that'll be the final levy. But what Elizabeth was pointing out here as far as the abatement, that's a different cycle. Last year we did do it at the December at the same time we did the final tax levy, but it's an annual decision as far as abatement. Annual decision that she's saying you have a little more time as far as to decide about an abatement till March 1st. So that is the schedule related to the levy and the abatement.
So I apologize, the numbers on the screen are small. The board, I think, has numbers that you perhaps can see a little better. But in the blue line, well, it looks, I guess it's blue up there. My eyes are bad. What we've got is the actual 2020 tax extension. And it's important to note that in the levy year 2020, which is extended in 21, for the taxes paid in 21, there was an abatement the board voted on to abate $3,175,869. So that 2020 percent increase of your total levy went up 1.4%. The tax rate came down, and for the owner of a $500,000 home, actually resulted in a decrease in taxes of $262. Right. So we're sticking with a 500 all the way through, but right. So if they put an addition on, that's going to result in an increase in improvements.
Frankly, Elizabeth, the assessor, for whatever reason, moves stuff around, and every year one type of house will go up, another type of house will go down. I think it ends up kind of net zero, but as we did a random survey of people's property tax bills, some went up, some went down. I haven't found any that stayed the same, by the way. But
Interesting.
So for whatever if your relative assessment changed, your property tax bill changed as well.
Can I ask a general question?
Yes.
So for that year where we abated the 3.175 million, what rate did we levy at?
So the total tax rate is 3 columns from the right. The total tax rate was 4.324. And that was down in tax rate from the prior year, 2019, which was 4.487.
So we could have levied up to 4.487.
Well, you really could have levied anything you wanted within the, within the tax cap.
Yeah.
But the board decided to abate that $3,175,896. And Chris, you can probably, and Karen can probably remember exactly how we came to that number. It's foggy in my mind right now, so I apologize.
It was a combination of the CPI increase for the year, along with enough debt service that it kept the debt service, I think, roughly level to the prior year, or did we increase it a little?
It's down from the prior year because debt
Well,
service.
but
I see what
both
you're
total
saying.
combined, it's
Total.
down because we abated entirely from the debt service.
Yeah.
Whereas we did not abate from the operating levy,
Gotcha.
but we made up for that by abating for the debt service. So yes,
Got
the
it.
debt service was down by all $3.2 million. Whereas really the intent was part of it was operating levy, but the administration did not want to lose that operating levy for future years. So our compromise was to abate out of the debt service all of it.
Got it. Got it. And I think I remember conversation about a pandemic year and all that kind of stuff too, right?
Right.
It was also to pay down the debt service from the previous referendum. I mean, that's what we're saying, right? As much as we could? Or is that, I'm trying to get it to layman's terms.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Don't
think of it that
use
way.
that language only because an abatement is not paying down debt. It's not retiring principal. It's simply saying, we're not going to levy taxes on the community. We're going to use our own money to pay that instead. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think that's important for us to be that clear. So thanks, Elizabeth.
But we were trying to keep the the tax impact flat, with no new construction. And so it was the 2.3% CPI on the operating plus the increase in debt service from the 1 year to the next, and that totaled the $3,175,896. It was an attempt to keep everyone's tax bill flat.
Right. And I think that really reminds me now exactly what we were thinking then, because the total levy did go up, but that's by virtue of the fact that you had $44.7 million of new property come on the tax rolls in the district. So, for somebody who says, well, it went up by $2 million, well, it did because of that new property.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Elizabeth, I mean, I guess that's why I wanted to say, in theory, right? And what we're trying to do is, your example was that the impact of a $500,000 home was negative 262. You might not have recognized that. I didn't recognize a negative because it's the people who are paying into the district. So, for example, like there's TIF districts and those sort of things that kind of make it a little bit muddy, right?
Well, and that stuff is all, when you look at your total tax bill, you've got the village, you've got DuPage County, you've got a park district, all these things that go into it. So the only thing we can control, obviously, is the district. But the district's tax rate did go down. So assuming the home value didn't change, it should have been a decrease for the district's portion. Yep.
Right. And that's why this kind of approach may be perceived differently by different members of the community, right? So it may be beneficial to some, but not to all. So you have kind of that piece going, right? The other piece is, and I want to go back to something that you said, Liz, a few moments ago. So the debt service was reduced by operating.
It was. So to enact an abatement, you're just lowering the taxes on the community, but you still have to pay the debt service.
Right, so you still have to pay that bill. And that bill then comes from district fund, which,
Yes, we did a transfer from the operating
Right.
funds for $3,175,896 to
cover the
cover
abatement.
the debt service for the abatement, yes.
Yes, so I just want to think a little bit longer term and bigger picture. We're a large district with many buildings, lots of maintenance costs year to year. And $3 million, although is a great gesture to reduce taxes or reduce the tax burden for the community, we also have to be mindful that we have not just this large project of the referendum finalizing in the next couple of years, but every year we're going to have a slew of facility operating and maintenance things that come up or that we have to just maintain over time. And so when we're thinking about district budget and what we're doing with the dollars that we have already and then the future dollars that are coming in, we have to have that long-term focus on all of the risk that we're taking on with a large school district and large community that we serve, right? So I'd rather be over-prepared and have a little extra than under. And that kind of speaks to what we're doing right now, potentially. We'll talk about the referendum and the overage and how we're going to end up paying for that. So those are the moments that we don't want to have a negative impact on students and learning and facilities and maintenance and operations, if we can help it, kind of seeing it a little bit sooner.
Athena, I think we'll talk about this in a minute or two.
Sure.
But I would say our reserves, which were $38 million on our low cash flow point of the year, are more than a little. That's enough to build an entire school building. That's an enormous amount of money. And that is built up over the last, 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And I think that people could accuse us of overtaxing for the last 10 or 15 years, because school districts, the intent of the law is that they are pay as you go. And that if you were to build a school, the intent is that you go to referendum, the voters approve it. You can't build a school without voter approval. And then, like we did, you borrow the money and you pay for that school through those bonds during the useful life of the building. And that's the intent of the law. The legislature enacted the PTEL law so that school districts wouldn't overtax. And unfortunately, it's turned into a situation where school districts just tax to the maximum that PTEL allows them to, whether they spend the money or not. And, I understand how that happens, because we seem to do our budgets because we comply with the state of Illinois law. We're approving our operating budget in September for a fiscal year that we're almost a quarter of the way through. Instead of, the way it should be done is we estimate what we're going to spend next year and then levy that amount of money. But we levy after we have the budget. We levy before we have the next year's budget. So it's backwards. It's hard to do, but it's undeniable that we have accumulated an enormous amount of money. And we need to figure out what is the best thing to do with that money for the benefit of the community.
For sure. And I don't want to make the statement or this assumption out there about what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say that we should overtax the community. I actually would be against overtaxing the community. What I want to talk a little bit more about is how we invest those community dollars that are given to the district because of all those challenges that you just presented about how the law and school finance makes us do this whole thing that we're talking about tonight, right? That we're able to take those dollars when they're with us and invest them appropriately back into our buildings, back into our schools, back into our staff to get to that achievement, to get to that community and excellence that we're trying to achieve. We're trying to raise that level of education for our buildings or for our kids. And that costs dollars. Karen's waving her hand, so I'll stop.
All I'm saying is that we've been talking about this and ramping it up and got to this point that we did last year.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that it's the right direction with all those things in mind. So if you go back to previous board meetings over the last 10 years, and especially, when we were getting ready for referendum, we said these things. We were in the red when I got on the board.
Yeah.
And look at how much we've ramped up.
Right.
We were supposed to be spending $1.5 million on maintenance. Since then, we've had Todd come in and look at it's 3, 4, it keeps going up, but anyway, $1 million.
Karen.
No, $1 million of
That's my
maintenance.
point.
No. And I'm telling you that was part of this, lots of years of conversation to get to this point. And so that is accounted for, the things that you're saying. I know later in the conversation, other topics, I'm going to bring up the same thing as when we talk about policy, strategic priorities. We used to talk about those sort of things. So what you're saying is valid, great, and we've done that. Don't think that we hadn't in this whole process. And we were also able to not only do those things, but also give the taxpayer some relief.
Yeah.
So it didn't go up as much. It would have, because we have to balance the two.
Absolutely, we have to balance them. And can I just make one more point, and then we'll move on, because we're trying to hijacking Liz's presentation here for a minute. When we think about our last board meeting, and we're talking about our administrative costs being 380 out of 385, right, in salaries. We're talking about what it costs today for public schools to support students in a highly effective way, right? And all of this makes sense to me, and I know that for the last decade, we've worked hard to build those reserves and to get to this good place of finance for the district. And we have to take those other things into consideration and make room for them. We have to make room for them. And so,
I guess all I'm saying is we'll have to continue to make room for them. I just want to take exception to that we didn't do those things. That's all I'm trying to say. Because we have had a lot of conversations in order to do that. We've added headcount, we've added people, we've increased salaries, we looked at ranges. So I just want to put the conversation into perspective is all I'm saying. All valid, but it's not that it wasn't done. Okay.
yeah, and that's not
It
what
needs
I'm
to
trying
continue
say.
to be
I'm
done.
saying forward thinking. This is the framework that I'm coming from. This is the perspective that I'm coming from. Potentially, we'll see. Yeah. Okay.
And
Sorry, Liz.
Elizabeth, I apologize delaying you even more, but to throw my 2 cents in. First, I think we all agree that we need a cushion. The question is, what is the correct size of the cushion?
And where does the cushion live? That I would add that.
What do you mean, where does it live?
So districts will look at this differently. When you go and ask the community for a very large referendum like we did, and we're just unbelievably supported by our community, right, to say yes to that large of a referendum, yeah?
Well,
many
it really
times-
didn't affect people's taxes.
Now we know
to-
that in
To the
hindsight.
extent, well, no,
Right.
we knew that. We refinanced all of our debt
Yes,
in order to be able to bring a referendum that
it's consumable,
that only affected a $500,000 home
yeah,
by $150 a year.
for sure.
So that was intentional. It
Yes.
wasn't hindsight.
That was intentional. I'm sorry, I spoke too fast. I thought you were gonna go back to the $4 or that it only actually raised by the very small amount. But there are ways in how we can structure the dollars through our operating budget, through CapEx. And when we have dollars that are in excess, like we do right now, the 38 million, is that accurate?
That's
Right.
correct. 38 million
So
on our
then-
low cash flow point of the day.
Very good, yeah. So the lowest cash point, 38 million. We know we're gonna incur some expenses that we'll have to take out of that, right? And then I think forward-thinking decisions about where your reserves lie. So think about all the buildings and all the property we own, and potentially, I'm just throwing this out there, this idea that we could move some of those dollars to the CAP fund for future use, right? So that in the future boards who might have to go to referendum will be able to minimize that impact on the tax dollar in a different way than you all did this last time, which was very effective, the way you did it, right? All I'm saying is that there are options, and there are different ways to structure these things, and that's all I'm presenting right now. I think we're in a great place as a district. I think Chris and team have done a wonderful job, and this committee has done a lot to get us out of where we were 10 years ago to today. Moving forward, I think that there are options that maybe are a little more innovative, a little more creative, that can get us to the same goal, because I believe we all have the same goal.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, and just 2 points that the fact of the matter is we're sitting on $38 million of the taxpayers' cash. And the other thing about where our rank is in terms of other school districts, part of it is we're lean administratively. The other part is, if we're intellectually honest, there's a whole bunch of little tiny school districts in Illinois that per student have a lot of administration. Whereas if we had, we are one of the largest school districts in Illinois. So administratively, we can have economies of scale that a 650 kid school district just doesn't have.
For sure. And we want to attract highly qualified administrators. And we want to keep highly qualified teachers and administrators.
Right,
And
and I think we've achieved that.
I don't know if we've achieved that when the indicators say, when all we talk about is the high rate of turnover, people moving for different jobs in other districts. I don't know if we've done that.
Well, we,
Yeah, we can continue to have the
Yeah.
conversations. We have in the past and
Yep.
we will, and,
all right.
you know, we just have been around and we've seen a lot of different things.
Yep.
And, you know, I'm okay with that when we talk a lot more about accountability and metrics too.
Sure.
Because we haven't seen, you know, student achievement increase as significantly as we've already invested. That's all.
And we need to take a really good look at why that might be. Yep.
Then,
Okay.
how about we give it back to Elizabeth?
Yeah, all right. Good conversation. So just tax rate, dollars and cents. In 2018, it was 4.512. In 2019, it was 4.487. And with the abatement, it was 4.324 in 2020 for taxes that are paying right now. Next year, 21, which is the levy you're voting on in November, we have a 1.4% CPI. I mentioned the 40 million new property. If we do nothing, that tax rate will go up by 20 cents. That's a second column from the right, highlighted in yellow. The next year, if we levy the full extent of the tax limitation law, the 2022 CPI could be 4.5, could be more, could be less, but we think it's going to be high based on where we are right now, as I mentioned. So that year, we would have another 19-cent increase in the tax rate. So that's another $300. And then after that, we go back to our assumption, which we hope is right. We can, you know, this is future board stuff, but it's important, I think, to look down the road at what we're looking in a normal year with a 2.2% CPI, which is what the Fed is targeting, and more limited new property. We're going to see kind of year over year, $100 increase, 193, 116, so on and so forth. So those are all future years, but this first situation is do nothing. What happens? And I think the important point I want to make is that the taxes for that $500,000 home, who's assessed at $500,000 market value, has gone down over the last 2 years. And if we do nothing, it's going to go up by about the same amount that it went down. But next year, with that higher CPI, the operating rate could go up another $300. So I think it's important to think not only of this year you're levying, but what do you want to do in the next year? Because interestingly, if you abate a ton in this 21 year, your increase next year is going to be much bigger. And that's one thing about abatement. Every time you move that money over, take it from operating and abate, the next year you kind of have to do the same thing or else you're going to have that jump. And then you compound it with a high CPI, and it could be double that.
So I thought that's why we talked about it being a process, the abatement process, and it wasn't just a one-year hit. It's a multi-year until we can flatten it. And I thought that what we said was we could do it for 3 years and we would flatten it. Granted, irrelevant of operating costs, because that's separate than what this debt service abatement process that we talked about.
Yes. So to that point, if you look in the middle column, the debt service, you know, we are at some of the higher debt service payment levels in these next few years. Why? As we've talked about, we have to pay not only the new debt service on the referendum bonds, but some of the old debt service that's still out there from the old referendum. And it might be important to mention here that the old referendum debt service was about the same amount. So it's not like, but for the referendum, we did the restructuring to try to ease it. But what we're talking about last year is kind of slicing off those top parts of the debt service to keep it nice and stable. But what that, you know, doesn't do is it doesn't keep the taxes from the CPI as increasing, which again is part of the tax limitation law. So it is important to know 15.88 is what we're looking at this year. Next year, 16.4, 15.8, then it goes down, 15.6, 15.1, so on, and down into the 14 millions over time. Let's go to the next page. Here's option 2. Debt service level at 15.6 million beginning with 2022 levy. So this is do nothing in 21, but then in 22, the debt service is 15.6. We abate 800,000 to take it down to 15.6, excuse me. It would have been, if you look on the prior page, 15.8. Again, we're leveling off at that 15.
It would have been
16.4, sorry, yes, 16.4. Thanks, Chris. So leveling the debt payments at 15.6 till they naturally begin to fall off in the future. That's this first option. And you can see it makes the increase in 22, assuming we have that high CPI, to 264 instead of $300 on the $500,000 home. Next page is option 3.
So in that
ahead,
one, the debt service levy went down by 200,000 to the 15.6 in 22, and then stayed at that 15.6 in 23, and then 24.
Yeah.
Trying to flatten that debt service for those 3 years. That's the concept in that option.
And can I just be clear, what you're taking is the 800,000, then the 200,000, the 2 consecutive years out of operating to chip the edge off.
Yeah, we would do an operating transfer from operating to debt service in order to pay that abatement, yes.
Option 3 levels the debt service at 15.2 million. Again, not doing anything in 21, but coming back in 22 with an abatement of 1.2 million that year to bring the debt service down to the 15.2 million level, abating 600,000 in 23 and 400,000 in 24. So similar to option 2, it's just bringing that debt down to a lower level, and you can see the how it kind of ripples through. It makes the tax increase more stable at 125, 127 a year. And then the next, I guess that's it. That's it. So there's obviously so many iterations and permutations that you could do with this, but this was kind of our first swipe looking at similar things that we did last year, kind of cutting off the tops of those debt service payments and leveling out the debt.
Elizabeth, why aren't you proposing any abatement for this coming year?
Well, part of it is because, and Chris, you can answer this better because we worked on this together, but part of it is because of that large CPI that's coming next year. If we abate this year, that in our no increase situation, we're going to have a huge increase in 2022. So that's why we avoided abating in 21. Another reason is because we did reduce taxes in the last 2 years by a similar amount. Feel like we're just increasing it in 21 kind of to the same level as we gave back. And then I think the other points you were making is about the additional dollars you were going to need for construction out of the budget.
The other thing is, on average over 20, 25 years, the CPI is average 2%, and this year it's a 1.4. So it might be a little more palatable to get that, with the lower CPI this year. Next year, the CPI is going to be above average, and so it seems like next year would be a better year to abate than this year.
But this year, your projections show that the levy increase is 6.36% larger than the previous years, followed by that big CPI number where the levy increase is 4.71%. And that's with the larger abatements. In any of these scenarios, in the next 2 years, it looks like our property taxpayers' bills are going up by over 11% in 2 years.
Well, the voters had passed the increase, which had the rising debt service, and then we abated last year. And I think the board's thought on it was we were remote for the year and felt like the board should do the abatement because we weren't offering the same in-person instruction that we had been, or that was the expectation. So a lot of that increase is because it was increasing because of the referendum, and then we had an abatement, which is kind of put this debt service structure into where it was going to go up a lot this year.
The abatement makes the next year go up a lot if you don't abate the same amount or more every year, which is, in my opinion, part of the issue with abatement.
But we talked about that I guess, again, and I remember clearly saying, Chris, present to the board. It's a process. This is a multi-year. So this is one, and I remember making the comment, this is the first of a few years that we'll have to do, and it's the right thing because we have the money. We still have the money. So what I was expecting to see is that process that we've talked about in the past, and the board had approved, that we would see what does that look like, because that was the whole reason why we had the conversation and got to that point.
I remember specifically stating, and I remember Elizabeth stating, that abatement is an annual process. It's a 1-year decision. It's not a multi-year decision. You can plan, for abatements, but abatement is a decision made each year, not you don't make it a 5-year abatement. You only make a 1-year abatement.
Understood. And we said we'd vote for that one, but we'd talk about the process. And we said it would be 3 years. So I guess that's what I'm looking for, of what would those projections look like. That's what I expected to see.
Well, and I think the one thing that has changed dramatically this year that we had no idea would happen last year is the CPI. And so,
and that would make sense why you didn't do that. I would still like to see it. Because that.
So I think that, and I agree that abatement's an annual decision to be made because the environment changes year to year, especially with our fixed revenue and the amount of district expense that is not fixed, right? There is a fixed amount that we can anticipate that Chris does a really nice job anticipating. Yet there are other service pieces that come into play when it comes to student learning and what they need to be successful at school, when it comes to our operating budgets and our bricks and mortar and everything else that school districts pay for. So I like the idea of hedging a little bit and seeing how the numbers play out actually quite nicely in the 3 different scenarios that you gave us, and taking advantage of that CPI to get somewhere in this first one with the reduction of the abatement. Because the abatement means we're taking money out of operating to pay debt service. So someone's paying the bill, and I think this, for me, becomes a larger question about what are the demands, the financial demands that we're looking at, and I know we don't get there till later because of the budget and the timelines for those approval of the estimate. but thinking and knowing that school expenses are constantly on the incline. They're increasing. Operation for a school is not decreasing across the state, across the country. And I think we have to do our due diligence and make sure that the tax dollars that we are requesting are put to good use and are meeting the needs of our students and the expectations of our community of what they want out of school. And unfortunately, the way the timelines are set up, we have to make that decision before we know what next year might look like. And I'd also like to, again, talk about a longer range plan, 5 or 10 years out. What does this look like and where are we at? Not necessarily on this finance piece, but what are the district needs? What are the student needs? What do we see coming? Some of those things we can absolutely plan for and make sure that those are in line with what our goals are as a district and a board with Keisha and the administration.
Athena, if I can illustrate some of the points you're making historically over the last 10 years. Roughly 10 years, maybe it was 12 years ago, our budget was $100 million. Our student population has grown 200 students since then, out of a current population of about 8,500 kids. And our budget now is $141 million, so 41% larger. Our student achievement has not measurably increased relative to other school districts. So, and our reserves have gone from 0 to $38 million. So I think over the last decade or so, we've managed through that process quite well. Unfortunately, the lacking component has been increasing student achievement. So more money didn't buy us better student achievement. And so I would contend that those two are independent of one another.
Potentially. When we look at this on a finance only black and white, and we don't look at the whole picture of what the district needs and where they're at, and matching resources to our programs, to our people, that's what you're gonna get, Jim. But until we start matching our resources to the goals and the schools and the people in a way that's more forward thinking, this is what we're gonna get.
Can you be specific
We just
about
need to
what
do it
that?
now. I mean,
I agree,
it's
Karen.
valid. We've done it in the past. We've had lots of discussions. We used to meet a lot. All of your points are valid. It's just, that's why we also had this conversation to say, we can do it all. We have proven that we can do it all. And what we need to do is, yes, we need to start having those conversations, but Keisha's new, and so we haven't. We will get to that point, but it's not in isolation. I agree with you. And in that same cycle that we've been doing, because we've done a lot of strategic things, and we talked about it from, we said, okay, so we had an extra $1 million, and we went to the superintendent and said, with these parameters strategically, what's the priority? What would you do to increase student achievement? And, we had conversations around that, and that happened, even though we also wanted to structure what's real and what's needed, and to be a lot more with financial acumen and fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayer. So I believe what we had talked about for several years, and we finally executed the first year of it. And I know that we said we were going to look at it each year, but your numbers and where we are financially, I strongly believe that we can still continue that process another year, and we can still do the strategy. We didn't have all this money.
Yeah,
We did not have all this money.
Karen, to Karen's point, we have plenty of reserves to achieve both.
Well, I don't know what plenty means, Jim. I'd like to see what, and maybe Liz can speak to this. What do other schools typically have in reserves, and how do they structure it?
A lot
And
less than
where are
us.
we in well, and I want to look at comparable schools, maybe either other K through 12 districts or neighboring schools, districts that might have similar communities to ours, that have similar expectations to that our parents have. to see what they have in reserves and how they structure their back end so that they are forward thinking and future ready. Not going year by year and making decisions based on an anticipated
But the
budget.
law was created for school districts to go year by year. That is the intent of the law.
I'm not saying bypass the law at all.
But as I look at these forward financial projections, I mean, the fact of the matter is that Illinois has the second highest property taxes in the country. That we, the school district, are 70% of a taxpayer's property tax bill. And we have $38 million in reserves. And if we have accumulated over the last dozen years, and if we look at the scenario where there are no abatements, our taxpayers are looking at a 6.36% increase this coming year, followed by a 5.59% increase the next year. I would be more comfortable if we spent some of our resources on the taxpayer and soften that blow a little bit.
We have to have that conversation in conjunction with the overage and how we're going to pay it for the project, because the 38's no longer 38. And so
So-
we're dwindling away, and having 20 million in the bank, I don't know. I got to tell you, for a school district of 8,500 people with the students, with the employee base that we have, and the number of buildings that we care for every year, it is a lot of money. It doesn't feel like a lot of money.
I came on board and it was zero.
I
Okay, it
understand
was
that,
negative.
Karen, and I respect that. And like I said, we're in a great place right now. This is about forward thinking and where we're going to go and where we want ourselves to be in 5 to 10 years. And when we make these decisions to abate based on these numbers, what I'm seeing in front of me, because that's what I think I'm hearing you ask for. All I'm saying is, I don't know if that's the decision we should be making this year. It might be a decision that we should be making in 2 years or 3 years.
Well, 2 years or 3 years from now, people's property tax bills will be 12% higher than they are right now if we do nothing.
And you will have a better
And-
idea of where the district is.
Well, we have a pretty good idea where the district is now.
I understand you've been here. I'm talking about future forward thinking.
That's what we had to
And-
do, is all I'm
and-
saying. I've been
This
exactly
is
at
a little,
this
I gotta
spot.
be honest, Karen, it's a little short-sighted. It's year to year. It's
Well,
coming
but
on.
but
because
again,
right
that-
now in
this
this.
Year to
conversation.
year is the process that the state of Illinois has set up for us. And we need to, as we just discussed, we need to talk abatement year to year. Last year, we put together a plan, and this year, we're starting from square zero. Because it is a year-to-year process, as Elizabeth points out.
So I think we need more information then.
Specifically, what kind of
We
information
mentioned
would
a
you
few
need?
things. I think we need to understand a longer range plan of what those facility challenges are going to be. I think we need to know comparatives around school districts like ours and what their reserve base is like and how they structure, whether it's moving dollars into CapEx, having dollars in reserve, and just the percentages that they hold in their pocket. And Karen, I know it sounds like you've done it. I'm new to the board. Please,
That's what I'm trying to share.
I understand, but the community's also new. And so making these things known, not all the community, but we have new members to our community, new parents with young children, and I'm just trying to be fiscally responsible in a way that does not pigeonhole future boards potentially by making decisions or constrain our superintendent administration and push them in a place where it could be difficult to operate, to retain highly qualified teachers, to retain highly qualified administrators, to retain and work in and find that student achievement growth that we're looking for. All those things, and those are the expectations of our community.
And I know that, and that's what we've been doing, balanced with also hearing my tax bill is too high. You've increased every year. It's high. So that's all I'm saying is our responsibility is all of it. And we were trying
70%
to
of our
get to this
taxpayers
point.
don't have kids in our schools. What we can do for them is provide an excellent education so that people want to move to this community for the schools, so that those people's property values are higher than they would normally be if the schools weren't so good. And we've grown our reserves from 0 to 38 million over the past dozen years, and unfortunately we have not had commensurate growth in student achievement. So
We just talked about the two are not parallel, and it's not that black and white, right? Student achievement is not going to increase at the rate of our financial.
all I'm saying is that we have accumulated so much of the taxpayers' money that we have an opportunity here for the next 2 years, these projected increases of 6.36%, followed by 5.59%, to show that this board is taxpayer friendly and is willing to spend some of our excess reserves to cushion that blow.
And it doesn't mean, and it doesn't equal that anything else is lower, is all we're saying.
Elizabeth, your turn again.
So in terms of additional information to review additional options, we want to bring back fund balance policies and actual fund balances, low cash points of your comparable districts, right?
I'd love to see what the percentages are that they keep in reserves. Because when we make statements like, we have a very large amount, how do we know that? Okay, well, we'll look at it again. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah. And Athena, also to one of your points is we have been, and I believe we still are, the best paying unit, the best compensating unit school district in DuPage County.
I'm looking at retaining highly qualified teachers and administrators. That's where
Well,
I'm coming from.
you can't compete against-
You can compete against schools that are high performing.
Well,
that are-
I'm sorry, you can, if I can
Sure.
finish my sentence. The way it has evolved in Illinois is it is very difficult for a unit district to compete on a pay scale with a high school district.
That's not what I'm
So-
asking for, Jim.
Okay. But every time I've asked our administration over the past decade if our teacher turnover is higher than other districts, the answer every time has been no, it's not.
So can I ask you a question? You talk a lot about student achievement. How do you feel like we're going to get there?
To better student achievement?
Yeah, to increase student achievement. What do you think are some of those proponents of getting there?
This is why we hire an administration
Yeah,
and a leader like Dr. Campbell,
of course.
who has a track record of improving student achievement.
Yes.
So I'm going to let her do her job. And I'm going to measure her on that achievement.
So the fundamental pieces need to be sound and in place in order to get where you want to go and where we have a shared goal here of increasing student achievement, right? There are fundamental pieces that need to be in place. And if things like,
I'm curious because
can I
you
finish
were-
my
Yes,
sentence?
absolutely.
Thank you. If things like the third grade teacher is new every year, that has an impact on the continuity, the school culture, what that team is able to build and do, and how they're able to learn about their students and move them on from year to year. And all those fundamental pieces have something to do with, have an impact on student achievement in the long term. So there's this collaborative piece where, and here's the grind, and this is all school districts, right? We're trying to, of course, be mindful of and balance our constituents' property tax bills with the needs of the district. And when we say things like what I heard at our board meeting last year, that we didn't increase staff last year, right? And okay, it sounded like that was something that was, I was not on the board then, that was framed that we should do. Okay, so that's one variable.
Can I just insert a fact there? That is
Sure.
because of the COVID crisis that we didn't increase staff.
Okay,
That, you know, it's singularly
Sure.
to that externality.
okay.
Okay.
So my point is that instead of, I feel like, and maybe it's the nature of this, of our committee, is that we look at the dollars and cents, and we have to remember the other pieces about students, what they need, our teachers, taking care of them also, our community demands and expectations for the education in our community and what we offer. And I'm just asking that we balance all that. And we don't know, just like you said, we don't have the budget yet for a year or two from now. We don't know where we're going to be, but we have to make these decisions now that impact us 1 and 2 years down the road. So I'd rather be safe than sorry and wait a year or two, see what the actual impact ends up being, and then have another conversation about abatement later on.
You're saying you'd like to increase your experience set.
No, that's not what I'm saying. No, that's not what I'm saying at all, Jim.
And my other question is, the third grade teacher being new every year, is that a hypothetical or is?
Yeah, I'm giving you an example. When we talk about high turnover,
But our turnover, every time I've asked, the administration has told me it's no higher than other schools.
to me, that doesn't matter, Jim. I'm talking about community culture and school culture. And if I'm a principal in a school, I want to have a group of people who I can build and develop and work with kids and know those kids and move them year to year through their articulation. And when that door revolves and staff are constantly
So
leaving,
you're looking-
that has a negative impact on
So
what my goal is.
Your
Can I
goal
finish
is,
talking?
yeah,
I'm sorry, there have been multiple times where I've been interrupted. So that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to get to the environmental piece of what the impacts of these decisions are on our schools and in our classrooms. That's all.
so is your goal 0 turnover of all staff?
That's not what I said, because that's
Well, but
unrealistic.
But again, you speak in hypotheticals, and I'm just trying to follow along. I mean, I'm
So
just,
where are you lost, Jim? Where am I not making
well,
sense?
you're saying that the third grade teacher is new every year.
So let's step back. Can we step back a second? We're going to pretend that we're all school principals for a minute, okay? You're a principal, you run a school. And say you're going to be principal say you've been principal for 5 years, okay? Or 10, pick a number, it doesn't matter, longer term. For you to build the school culture, to provide the resources and the supports that students need to be successful in school, to have an impact on that student achievement in your building in the way that we all want to happen. If the door continues to revolve on our teachers, that sets up a more difficult situation, a more difficult path to reaching this goal than trying to build this team, develop this team, and keep people here. They know our students, they know our teaching and learning, they build curriculum together, they build student resources together. There's a school culture piece there that has a profound impact on students and their achievement. So when the door is revolving, we go back to finance, that impedes upon this kind of more idealistic situation that I'm painting here. Does that make sense?
No.
To me, and I remember talking about this with Bloom and Ebner and the crew. And we did a lot of experiments in checking that out. And there wasn't a one-to-one. That's all I'm saying. So, so it's a lot more complex than that.
Yes, it is.
Okay? You know, and we chose to, you know, make a change. And so here we are. But we shouldn't have to start from square one. I guess that's my frustration here. So I'm, you know, like I said, I understand where you are. We've been here. We have been able to grow reserves and increase what we've done in this district. And I believe wholeheartedly that we will continue to do that. and it's very complex, and there's historical information that we can, bring to the table that I think should be validated and part of the conversation. So not like starting from scratch. So what I would like to do is, I understand that we as a board had to vote each year, but we did have a process in place to look at it. And that's what I would like. My take is I'd like to see what we were planning and what that impact would be. Totally understand that 4.5% increase in CPI is going to, wreak havoc, but it's also going to be a big increase in revenue for us.
I want to thank Elizabeth for coming tonight. She has another meeting to get to, and
Sorry, Elizabeth.
Yeah, sorry to keep interrupting, but you've spurred a great conversation. I personally would just like to see a scenario that levels out a little bit the impact to our taxpayers over the next 2 years.
Meaning kind of, yeah, like some abatement that takes a 6% down and makes it equal with the next year, which is the big CPI year, something like that.
So, yeah, something like that. Yeah, and that general idea of smoothing out that curve rather than an over 11% spike in over 2 years during the next 2 years.
Okay, and we'll bring the fund balance comparables back and the needs on that side too, and hopefully put it all together for another discussion.
And Athena,
Chris will let
maybe you
me
and I
know
could have an offline conversation.
And what's our time frame?
Very interested in your perspective
Don't
as
have
somebody
to
that's in the
pass the
field.
resolution until February at the latest for 21. Yes.
Go ahead.
You and me both.
Yeah, you're supposed to be there too?
I mean, the good news is we don't have to make this decision until February 22nd, so we got
We
time.
we were trying to be in front of it, so
So you have a
that
different timeline, Chris? End of year?
we'll definitely schedule another meeting to discuss this with more information.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Next is the fund balance policy.
So we brought this last meeting to discuss, and we had a lot of different opinions on it. But the two things go together, and so we were looking at changing the fund balance policy. The June 30th date is just difficult because a lot of school districts are on cash basis, some are on accrual basis. June 30th is right after we get the June taxes in, so it muddies the water and complicates things. So that's why we targeted in this fund balance policy, a cash basis, which is what we keep our monthly financials on that I bring every month. And May 31st is our cash flow low point, and that is illustrated every month in my chart that shows the operating fund balances. It looks like this. This chart shows September is always our high point, and May is always our low point. And and if you had to ever issue tax anticipation warrants like we did in 2007 because you don't have enough money in the bank to pay your bills, it would be the April-May timeframe that you would be trying to cover those months with tax anticipation warrants. So that is why this fund balance policy was targeted at May 31st, how much reserves you wanted to have in the bank on May 31st. So, and in this fund balance policy, it's 5 to 15%. The operating budget that we passed in the September board meeting was $141 million. So 5 to 15% would put us roughly at $7 to $21 million as as our reserve. Well, so what this says that, and this, the part of the fund balance policy that said it is in the intention of the board to avoid short-term borrowing, that's been in there for as long as I've been here. I think there was it was prior to me in 2011 that we did not want to get into that point like we did in 2007 where we had to issue tax anticipation warrants. We didn't want to have to borrow to pay our normal bills. So it's still that. So it is the intention of the board to avoid short-term borrowing to fund operating expenses. If the fund balance falls below the minimum percentage, the administration shall recommend a plan to replenish the balance to a level above the minimum percentage. If the fund balance exceeds the range, the administration shall present recommendations to the board for its consideration to use the funds that are aligned to the board's strategic priorities. Priority will be given to non-recurring expenses as well as consideration for abating a portion of debt service, property taxes for tax relief. So that's really what this fund balance policy is about. We talked about it the last time. We got a little hung up in the range. And I guess when I came up with this range, I looked at 5 to 15%, and I was looking back, and you see in May 31st, 2010, we were at about 5%, and we did budget cuts in 2010, 2011, and 2012. Those were all budget cut years that I know about. And 2011 was the EPERT year. That was before I started, or 10. It was in there in the 10, 11, 12 when we had. It was
2010.
2010 that we had EPERT. So that is why I thought 5% would be our low point, is because that's when we were doing budget cuts, and they were painful budget cuts from what I heard. So that's why I said 5%. On the low end. The 15% gets us up to to back in 2014 where we were starting to build reserves. So that is where I came up. I was looking at this cash flow low point chart that we had here and thought 5 to 15 seemed to be, when I recall, our financial situation, I thought that was the range where we wanted to be. Maybe, when we got above 15%, it was kind of, we were starting to build reserves. So that's how I came up with 5 to 15%.
Well, and actually this chart helped me with the last conversation and where I was. And, to the points that Athena was saying, about the comfort level. This gave me the comfort level. And granted, based on, paying attention to the board meetings since I've lived here for decades, but also being on the board for, the last 10 more years, is even with this policy, fund balance policy change that we would make, and with the referendum, extra dollars, let's say, for the other school buildings, I still, and moving forward, I'm all about, I can't wait till we start talking about that again, because we've always talked about that. I don't want to stagnate. I mean, that's what I came into with a little bit. And, I don't want to do that. And it made me comfortable that we can still do it all. And that was the whole point. That was the whole intent of working as hard as we have this last decade on behalf of the students and the employees and the taxpayers. So, I guess that's what we always wanted to do, is be able to balance it all. So thanks, Chris. I thought, this information helped me with linking all of these components that we have to make decisions on or have discussions about.
I just have a question. So 5% was kind of like a budget cut environment, right? And we'd be comfortable with that being our baseline?
Yeah, that's the low, I mean,
Yeah.
the thought was that would put us at $7 million, I mean, based on the current operating budget, 7 million at our low point.
And now you're looking at that 5%. So in like 2012 or 2011, right? When I look at that and see 3.2 and 4.9, or even just take 2010, 4.9, it's 5% of 97 million, right? So today you would fast forward as 5% of 138 million?
141.
141.
Yes,
Right?
correct.
Okay. Can I
It,
ask?
it will always be, and it's defined in here, the annual operating expenses.
Mm-hmm. And then did you write this or is this coming from press? I just have a question about one piece.
I wrote this.
You wrote this. Okay. I have a question about just writing in priority will be given to non-recurring expenses as well as consideration for abating a portion of debt service property taxes for taxpayer relief. What do we mean by that? So I get it, like if the fund balance exceeds the range, the administration, Chris would present to the board consideration to use the funds that are aligned to the board's strategic priorities and then prioritize abatement and non-recurring expenses, right?
Yeah, the thought is, non-recurring expenses are more like what we've been talking about, facilities, not staffing. And abating is a much preferred way because it's a one-time hit on fund balance rather than your operating revenue stream.
Mm-hmm. And in our district, our practice is not right now to take, if you're above the 15%, right, to take that and move it to capital funds or anything like that. That's not our practice right now, right?
So our current practice right now is the last few years we've been doing 4 million of transfers a year. 4 million in order to cover summer capital maintenance projects. That being said, I had some. I do hold down, or there are requests that I do, scrutinize for, let's say, furniture. We did 5th grade furniture. Right now we're meeting with 4th grade teachers. We've also done kindergarten. We're finishing off kindergarten and doing 4th grade, and we're meeting with those teachers and working on so we'll have 5th grade, 4th grade, after this budget, we'll have 4th grade done and kindergarten done. That being said, we haven't done 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 1st grade. We haven't done middle school. We haven't done the high school, but we do a little bit. I scrutinize requests. So I'm saying we do, 4 million, and, Todd's been chipping away at flooring, and, we definitely, his plan is to do roofs and paving and that sort of thing with the 4 million. But it is definitely like a long laddered out plan. We are definitely not addressing all needs immediately. If we wanted to, speed up furniture or flooring or, something else, as far as non-recurring expenses, we could do that. I've, always been trying to stay within. I'm always concerned about expenditures outpacing revenues, and so I do, try to manage all of that.
Yeah. How do you get the 4 million?
Well, when we did the 1.5, that was based on square footage of our buildings. We had like 1.5 million in square footage of all of our buildings. But it didn't seem like we were keeping up.
Yeah.
And you know, we I think the previous facility director was focused on building envelope, like masonry and windows and roofs, but we really didn't do a lot with mechanical, like air conditioning and heating and ventilation. So I don't think we had a formula to come up with 4 million, but it was increased from the 1.5, which was a formula. So I mean, the 4 million puts us at a little more than 2 times per square foot.
And it sounds like that's an appropriate budgeted allocation. Like it's meeting the
We're
needs.
definitely starting to, I mean, since Todd has been, we also have the referendum going on, so we have a lot of facility upgrades happening right now, but you know, I'm sure Todd would love to have more than 4 million to do more flooring or to do more furniture, but it feels like we're starting to make progress for sure on facilities.
Great, thanks.
Can I, Athena, you mind if I add to that? History from the dollar a square foot. We, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, we struggled to say what is the right budget.
Yeah.
We took a look at the real estate investment trust industry and REITs that owned office buildings, since we felt that school buildings were most analogous to office buildings, and found out what they allocated per year, and they allocated $1 per square foot in maintenance. And that's where that $1 per square foot came from. It turned out for school buildings that, you know, once Todd got here, you know, different maintenance directors have different ideas. And his predecessor, as Todd described it, was running a run to failure model. Todd, coming, I think, from the Navy, doesn't, you know, thinks that that's not the right model, and is more familiar with the mechanicals, which are more expensive. And I think that what I have found through the years is that if we don't maintain our buildings and then we come with a referendum to raise money for building maintenance, our community is outraged that we haven't been maintaining the buildings as we should. So, you know, if Todd feels that $4 a square foot for a while is the way to go, then, you know, then I think that's the right thing. Our kids deserve well-functioning buildings, particularly with the COVID situation. Good airflow and maintenance of air conditioning systems is a high priority. So, you know, I you know, in terms of, I don't know how we got on the maintenance subject, but yeah, we need to do what it takes to make sure that we have buildings that are in good shape. I think our community expects that. And I found that when school boards start running out of money, the first thing that gets deferred is maintenance. So when you're not running out of money, you better pay attention to maintenance. So, and then my general comments about this policy is, first of all, I think we're looking at the right day of the year. I think May 31st, which is our low cash flow point, gives us the best perspective of how much cash, extra cash, we actually have. So I think, Chris, you picked the right day of the year. I think, you know, that 5% of an annual budget is a good warning track, that you still have time to reverse course when you get down to 5%. I will contend that 10% is probably the high end of my preference. I'm willing to compromise at 15%. But And I'm fine with 15% because it doesn't preclude a school board, a future school board, from, spending money down below 15% or abating, until that fund balance is below 15%. So it doesn't tie a future school board's hands. So I'm fine with that. I think this is a good policy looking at actual, and correct the day of the year for when to measure all this. Our previous policy was kind of a rule of thumb that 26% was on a cash basis accounting system using July 1st as your day of the year, and then estimating that if you have 26% of your budget in hand using a cash basis accounting system on July 1st, you probably have enough to get to the end of the year. And that's, I think your proposed policy, Chris, is far more accurate than the rule of thumb of the last policy. So I think this is a good place to start.
One other thing I just want to bring up, just that one year we did we were looking at a 4 million, and we put on hold the Bryan gravel lot, and so we only did like 2.6 that year instead of the 4. We didn't transfer the whole 4 and so that maintenance garage issue has kind of been put on hold, and so it is something that needs to be addressed, and so I just wanted to make sure, like, I know that the board knows about the $11 million in additional scope beyond the referendum, but there's also this looming maintenance garage issue that we have out there that needs to be addressed as well. I just wanted to bring it up because we are continuing to look for a solution related to that.
That's a good point. We should, in our mental bank of reserves, we should hold out a certain amount when the right property comes along to house that maintenance garage. If we can find a property with enclosed storage that extends the life of our vehicles versus digging a hole to store water, which doesn't do anything for the life of our vehicles. So I'd rather spend the money on an enclosed space than do a whole lot of floodwater abatement. So.
And then Jackson is also, we have the alternate bid, and the demographic study. The demographic study will begin, it'll be up for approval at the next board meeting, the demographic study, and then and the proposal is to have it completed in mid to late December. That we'll have the demographic report back from the demographers. So those that I just wanted to put out there just so for awareness.
Can I just, a couple things. So that demographer report will be used potentially for target staffing the next school year. When do you typically do that? Or do you connect those two?
It sure could, yes.
Okay. Wanted to go back a little bit to, I'm just going to put this out there, Jim. You're at a 5 to 10. I'm at a 10 to 15. Let's just, that's kind of where we are. But I think it speaks to just, which is good to have the diversity on a committee like this, right? And I think the reason why I go to that other end, and I'm really talking about capital fund as a place where you would even hold money. So I know right now you're transferring 4 million in for 4 million to go out. And what I am maybe proposing, and maybe you can think about it, I don't know, I don't make your decisions, but it's just a food for thought. If you were in years like ours right now, where we have more than we've had in the past in reserves, when we put maybe 1 to 2 million extra in CapEx and have that grow over time, when your garage comes up, or when something goes awry, you have a little bit in that's earmarked specifically for those capital moments. And it's a safeguard. It takes money out from, potential abatement, but it's a reinvestment back into our district in a way that is a little different. So just food for thought.
So interesting. I was where you were last meeting, 10 to 15%. And with looking at the numbers and kind of, where we've been, I am now comfortable with the 5%, which I wasn't before. I like the wording on the policy because that helps. It helps future boards that haven't had this experience to manage it within that range. So they should never get to that point. I know how easy it could be if you really don't, do the things that, we put together the past decade. So that kind of in a nutshell on the, the range. But I have some specific questions about the policy. So when you list the different funds, accounts, what funds aren't listed and why wouldn't they be listed?
The debt service fund and the capital projects fund.
Okay, and you typically don't include them in this policy because of?
Well, they're not operating funds. So, the only way the revenues for the capital projects are fund is through bonds or transfers. So there's no regular revenue stream to capital projects. And then, the debt service is strictly, other than the abatements, it's to pay debts. So we do transfer from the ed fund for the technology leases, and we had debt certificates, which were to be paid from operating for this building and for the stadium. So those are transferred to the debt service. And then other than that, the debt service is just property taxes that were passed by referendum in order to pay the bonds. So those are all considered non-operating, and this policy is focused strictly on the operations, not the debt service or the capital outlay.
Okay, I think that's important for us to communicate. And I would actually be okay with, let's see, it's the third paragraph, the last sentence. If the fund balance falls below a minimum percentage, the administration shall recommend. I'm even okay with a multi-year financial plan to replenish the balance to a level above minimum percentage. But, I'm just adding that verbiage because of, the experience we've had is, what you want board members to know is that, they really need to be paying attention not to get to this place and to really learn about, what it takes to stay in good financial health and all the pieces that you do have to manage. So anyway, I just thought to have, if it's giving too much leeway, then don't put it in. But I'm trying to do a little bit of an education for future boards in the language too. But I just wanted to kind of throw it out for
Tiffany,
conversation.
did you get the language? Because I didn't get it. Can you say it again,
Yeah,
Karen?
yeah,
So we
so
both can
you're
can write it.
Well, and let me know if you agree with it. And Jim, you've been around too, so if it should just be a plan. But so it's the last sentence. It's red. It says, if the fund balance falls below the minimum percentage, the administration shall recommend. I'm recommending to add a multi-year financial plan to replenish the balance to a level above the minimum percentage. But is, saying financial plan too restrictive because it's not just financial, but, you really do need to
Yeah, you could just insert
Either
the
two.
words
That level's fine.
multi-year.
plan. Yeah,
That's
there
what
you
I
go.
did.
Okay.
Recommend a
Okay.
multi-year.
And you
plan
guys
to
are okay with that?
Yeah.
I think, the whole point you really want to hit it hard, but you really don't want to get to that stage. And so the whole point is, again, even though we make a decision on the abatement 1 year, you better not think about it and have conversations only at 1 year isolation, because you actually might be doing more harm to the taxpayer. I guess that's why I'm kind of really strong about, we had the conversation that yes, we make the decision each year and we look at it each year, but if we start going down this road, we have to get your minds wrapped around a multi-year.
Yeah,
if you're going to even go that route.
Karen. Yeah, I think
So-
it's a good ad.
Sorry.
Go ahead, you're fine.
Just to be devil's advocate, which is the role I love to play. Yeah, here and on TV. If by inserting those words multi-year, are you restricting the administration to present a multi-year plan, even though they could have presented a plan that solved the problem in one fiscal year?
I really want them to fix it. I don't want them, first off, I don't want them to be in the position, okay? Because, you really, anyway, get the right, people in play and you don't get to that point, hopefully, again. But secondly, I would want it to be taken care of immediately. And then the third would be multi-year. So I threw it out there to have this discussion. What's best? Or what's more clear? Because it's not, and I said financial plan, but it's really a big picture plan. But you should always be having a
Yes.
big picture plan.
Right.
And finances should be part of it, but it shouldn't be just what do we need, what can we get versus what do we need? Like realistically, what do we need?
Yeah.
And I guess that's the subtlety of the conversation that we had earlier is I think that we have learned enough that we should be able to manage this without gimme from the taxpayer. And also move the district forward and, do all the things we need to do. I think that we've proven that. And it wasn't easy, and we worked a lot of long hours to get to this point. And I guess I want that to be represented somehow, because otherwise it's lost.
Yeah,
And that was the whole point about kind of leaving a legacy. Of how this can really be done well for everyone.
Right. And I think the question is really around, so say you are in cash balance say you're in May 31st of 2011, right? What you would want to hear from the administration is a plan of how you're going to get above 3.24, right? And that plan, there might be an immediate solution. Exactly.
Because that's what we used to
That's what
do.
I'm saying.
Okay.
Right.
So you're never really in that. I guess that's my whole point, and that's why I then thought of the multi-year plan. But
that's where I was going, Karen. It's a piece of that bigger picture, and it's there. Yeah. So I don't think I don't know if it restricts. So if there is something that you could do a quick fix in 1 month, I think you could show that on the longer term, maybe. If you were,
Yeah,
I don't know. What do you think?
I'm just tossing it out there.
I'm not tied to either way. I just really want us to have the conversation about what's, what we're really trying to achieve here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with the wording plan. If it needs to be multi-year, then it should be multi-year. If it's 2 months, then it should be 2 months.
I'm okay with that.
That's just my opinion.
Maybe it's a practice versus a policy, Karen. Like the practices you're thinking longer
Yeah.
term, but the policy reflects, flexibility and what
Right.
needs to be
Right.
done. Mhm.
Yeah, my concern is I don't want to restrict people from doing the right thing
Quickly.
because there's wording in the policy that
Yep.
is interpreted.
I hear you.
So we putting multi-year in or leaving it out?
We can leave it out. Leave it as is. I'm okay with it. I just really want us to have the conversation.
No, that's
And
perfect.
how do we, if there was something to put in policy or procedures or even just education for everybody.
That's what we're here to do. So Okay. We good, recommending that the full board act on this policy?
Where does it go to the policy committee? I think we'll move it to the policy committee. Move it forward to them.
Speed of government.
Yes.
All right.
So the next item, I have a September financial report. Tiffany, you know, it's amazing. She closed out September already. You know, it's only October 5th, and
She was
Tiffany was working all night and got this to me so that I could put this forward to you today.
Tiffany just like gave me kind of the, what's the big deal? Kind of.
Oh, no. Well, she didn't give that to me.
This is how I roll right now. Sorry,
bless her.
guys.
Yeah. She knocked it out.
Thank
She
you.
knocked it out. So, I think you all know that our certified staff is the bulk of our expenditures and our budget, and so they start getting paid in September. So it's really early in the year. You know, July and August, you really can't get anything from. September is the first month where you start to see how we're doing or how, and you know, I know Jim loves when I'm the pessimist, and it's very difficult because the monthly financials, we're off to a pretty good start the fiscal year, the revenues. And we talked a lot about.
Chris, please don't
I
become an
know,
optimist.
it's terrible. As I said, you know, May and June we didn't get as many property taxes as we expected, so you know it kind of made up for it in July and August. So that's why property taxes are looking, you know, they're looking better than expected at this point because of that. You know, I know. DuPage County changed May and June. It's a strange collection cycle, and so the revenues are tracking well at this point. And then, and the expenditure side, you know, we're 1% less than we were last year at the same point in the year. Part of that is we were doing a lot of COVID spending last year at the same point in the year. Salaries, of course.
Sorry, before you go off of that point, so I guess what I'm thinking is, so it might be a 1.3% decrease from last year, because last year was high, but what is a typical year comparison is what I was interested in as well.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but the salaries is, you know, where I always focus salaries and benefits. Salaries are 3.2% higher than last year. You know, we had we have food service staff back this year, which we didn't have last year. We had a skeleton crew last year on the food services, so that, you know, pushes salaries a little higher. You know, we added all those back. Benefits is really quite good with the 1.3% decrease. You know, we've done some good things in our collective bargaining related to sunsetting, or the new employees can't get the PPO 1 plan. They can only choose from the HSA PPO or the HMOs. I think that has definitely made a difference. You know, that in the HSA plan, you tend to make better decisions. You know, so the IMRF employer portion has been going down a little bit. It's 11.07 in calendar 21, where it was 11.24 in calendar 20. So so the benefits are down a little bit, which is definitely a good thing. So we're tracking well through September. It's really early in the year to.
Hey, Chris, what do you attribute the decrease in IMRF contributions to?
Yeah, that it's not. I mean, it's just a slightly less.
But it's interesting.
That's all actuarial calculations of.
Oh, so they're telling us.
Yes.
Okay,
they
so
tell
that number
us.
comes from them
Yes.
that we owe them. Got it.
It's
Okay.
actuarial calculations of our retirees compared to the revenue. So,
Thank you.
then if you go, I mean, to the operating fund summary page, this one right here, that is page 9. You see the top FY22, we're at 73.05% fund balance to expenditures, where last year we were 69.72, the year before 70, 72. We've been, but this is the high point of the year. From this point down to May, every month, the fund balances go down. Because we get the property taxes in June and we get property taxes in September, and so that drives, that's our big revenue. So that's why from this point forward, we have all of our steady expenditures, and the fund balance goes down every month until May. I mean, the state funding, it says that the state owes us $543,000. We know that the big payments are for the categoricals. We have not gotten the September payment at this point. They're always delinquent with the categoricals. We did get the fourth quarter payment from last fiscal year of categoricals. We got that in July, and then we haven't got the September yet. They're always late on that one, on categoricals, but they keep up with the evidence-based funding payments. Well, they're flat forever, and unless, I guess, ideally they stay flat.
So 1 year we were tier 3, but we've consistently been tier 4.
Yes. So 4 out of what did I say here? 4 out of 4 out of 5 were tier 4. So the increase in EBF funding was $8,500 this year from last year. I had that little chart in there. Tier 4 receives 0.1% of new funding. No. So that's it. That's it for this agenda. I don't have any other updates.
Anything exciting from the demographer interviews and all that sort of stuff? Like, something new to try to capture, what's happening in Elmhurst, where we're landlocked, and, tear downs and rebuilds, and how do we account for those?
I mean, I think Jim and I were both, interested in the different techniques of the different demographers. A couple of them talked about that the births was not as important of a data piece for the forecast. One thought, one kind of had spent a lot of time working on births in the area, and others were like, births are not a big factor. So it's just interesting to hear the different.
Yeah, so we interviewed 3 demographers, and one of them, as Chris is explaining, is all about the birth rate in your city, in your school district. And as we looked at other school districts that demographer worked with, they were further away from metropolitan Chicago or any large metropolitan area. And, at least what I've observed, I think what we've all observed is, you grow up, the hypothetical, you grow up in town, you're in your 20s, you move into the city, you meet your spouse, you have your second kid, your oldest kid is about to go to kindergarten, and you're sticker shocked by the price of private schools, and you start looking for houses in the suburbs. Two of the demographers recognized that one of the demographers that we interviewed actually only does Chicago metropolitan area school districts. And, they both recognize that seems to be the process in the collar counties of Chicago. That, yes, you have some kids that are born in your school district, but the vast majority move in. So the one we chose uses Zillow data quite a bit because that's got, every listing of every house that's sold. And their process is they come up with a profile of the houses that are most likely, that have been sold, that are most likely to be purchased by families with children that are going to attend your school. And, clearly they look at what the ratio of public to private school kids are, et cetera. We also asked the demographers about the effects of new schools and will that attract more people. One of them had said they'd never studied that. The other two said, we don't think so. We don't think that'll be an increase.
Well, one said that I thought was interesting that if it was a new high school, they felt like it would have an impact.
But new elementary schools,
but not so much with new elementaries, not as much of a bump. And I did think that was interesting. I felt like the more sales of homes, or the more turnover or whatever, that the more growth you would see in enrollment, which kind of makes some sense, right? If you're buying a house, you're bringing students into the district. So I think that kind of was a point.
And that's the other thing we asked is what is their experience with towns like ours that are building condos in their downtown area and apartments in their downtown area. And I thought their answer was pretty insightful. They said, mainly, we don't expect a lot of students to be housed in those kind of housing units, and that certainly corresponds with our experience, some, but not a lot. But they said what it mainly does is allow people whose kids have grown to find a place to move, sell their house, but remain in town, and that increases the house turnover. And then you have more families with children moving into those single-family homes, and that increases your student population. So I thought that was very insightful. Yeah, that seems to correlate with what we're seeing.
So we think we're going to get some pretty solid data from these people, because these are the sorts of things that we were talking about, where they're capturing it in the past, and why we kind of didn't do a demographic study for a little while.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see what they come up with, and the choice was based on what seemed to be correlate with kind of our collective personal experience and what's happened.
I was a little disappointed when they said the census data would not be available, until at least
for a while
or whatever. So I was hoping that the census data would help to make, to help improve the demographic study using the census data, but they won't have that. So that was a little bit of a bummer.
Yeah, that's like a year off, apparently.
I was gonna ask, do they follow up with this if we do the deal with them, and then that is
I'm sure for a price.
I know, but
Right.
I'm like, come on, guys, bring it. Just give us a little bit of an update when you get that too.
Yeah, so that's a story on the demographer. All right. Anything else? Our next two upcoming meetings are October 12th, regular Board of Education meeting, and October 26th, regular Board of Education meeting in the same room we're in right now. Nothing else on our agenda, so our meeting is adjourned.